Welcome back to Insights from the Couch. Today we're going to talk to Cait Flanders, who is this really cool young writer who wrote the book The Year of Less and Adventures in Opting Out, a field guide to leading an intentional life. This is a woman who has sidestepped culture all over the place on her own terms. She stopped drinking. She's been sober for, I think, 7+ years. She did an entire experiment with a shopping ban where she just didn't shop for a year and got rid of a lot of the extraneous crap in her house and worked on her own terms as a self-supporting writer. And from there has done multiple solo travel trips and has lived abroad for, I think, well over a year now. So she's going to be popping on at some point. But
so cool.
yeah.
I cannot wait to talk to her. First of all, I'm jealous in like a healthy way. I don't begrudge her. I just sort of wish I had that life. But I really love this topic because we're talking about cultivating an intentional life on your own terms according to your values. And that'll look different to everybody. But I love the idea of weeding out, or as she says, opting out, and getting rid of what's extraneous, both the material and physical, the emotional, so that you're really homing down on like what you want. So we were just chatting before we started recording on like how when you do this, you lose people along the way.
Yeah. When you live in accordance with your values, certain relationships will fall away. And, you know, I was talking about in my own life that I have a really close family member who I always thought I would be super close with. And I do not have this person in my life anymore. It's my brother. And I grew up so close with him. But I was telling Colette, like, just to be in relationship with him is a real compromising of my own values. And it's just too hard. So you have to be okay with losses along the way, even though you're really not okay with them. You wouldn't choose them.
You miss that person and there's grief for that loss, but at the same time, your relationship with yourself matters more.
Yes.
And if somebody makes you compromise or abandon yourself in order to be in a relationship with them, you get to a point where you're not willing to do that anymore.
Amen.
So part of the opting out is people, right?
It's people. And I've seen other friends have to go through letting go friendships. It can be quite excruciatingly painful. But what that point is where it's more painful to compromise yourself. And choosing ourselves can be really hard.
It can be. And especially if you have a history of being a people pleaser. I can't even say it. It makes me sick, actually.
I hate that term.
Yeah, I do too. But I was a massive people pleaser and still consider myself one in recovery. But I haven't lost family members. I have lost friends or let go of friends. Maybe it just happens sort of naturally in some cases, and in other cases, there's been a hard stop. And then, Laura, you were saying to me when we decided to just hop on and get started, I love the term you use, that I live this sort of monk-like existence, which I feel like anyone who knows me will find very hard to believe.
Yes.
But tell me your perspective on that, because I'm curious how you saw me during that time or what you saw.
You never surprise, like, I've never ceased to be amazed by you because, like, as soon as somebody thinks they have your personality nailed, you always have a twist. So I guess I wasn't surprised to see you. I mean, I think, what were you, like, coloring your own hair and kind of like, you did like no nails and you were like running every day and working out, and you were like
no
not
alcohol.
drinking. Yeah, like, which, I mean,
I didn't drink for a year.
And you were super comfortable in that choice. Like,
I was.
It didn't seem to bother you at all to just choose yourself there. And you told me there were certain people you hadn't seen or weren't connected with, and you were kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very productive time for you.
I know, as you say it, I'm like, God, I kind of miss that time. Now, I have to say it was also during COVID.
Yeah.
You know, I think I used COVID as like a cocooning. because I thought, I'm not really going anywhere, at least for a little while, and seeing anyone. That's when I went back to being brunette, which I decided isn't really great for me, the way I look, but it saved me money and time. And you're right, my life got smaller. I think what was good about it, I wasn't spending money, I wasn't drinking. It was a quieter time. I'm normally pretty social. I didn't do much socially, but I felt very connected to myself, to my values, and I was really at peace.
Maybe I'm not fully neurotypical. I don't know. But it's hard on me. So the way you're
Yeah.
describing life is like the way I choose to live. I would choose to live all the time. Although there's always a tension of like, are you not engaged enough? Are you not in the world enough? And so that's my own conversation that I have with myself.
I really wonder for our listeners, how many of you guys feel pressure to be out in the world and on and socializing, or are more people at this age that have they already opted out of that and they're just kind of quiet at home doing their own thing?
Let's be honest. I think there's just a push to be relevant, to not miss out. Even, I even have that
FOMO.
voice and a little FOMO of like, oh, I guess everybody's sort of doing stuff. Why aren't I there? Even if you don't really want to be there.
Here she is.
Yay!
Hi.
Yay!
Yeah, so we're going to just jump right in because we already started chatting. Laura, I'll let you kind of take it away from here. And Cait, we're so excited to have you here. You're a beautiful writer and you have a wonderful message to share with our listeners.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I read your books. I'm almost through your second book, which is Adventures in Opting Out. But I read The Year of Less in like a day. And I was so like moved and inspired. But first of all, it's like completely my language of I'm always talking to Colette about like the need to like really sidestep the current of culture. Like I feel like it's a very fast moving current and it will swallow you if you don't make some really intentional choices about where you want to put yourself. But I'm also, just for like personal disclosure, a little bit of like a just right OCD type. So like the whole idea of getting rid of things really appeals to me. Like that's my safe space. Like when life gets really overwhelming, I'll just start throwing things out and cleaning my house. So I was like, yes, I want to live in this simple, intentional space. Will you tell our listeners like what was happening in your life that began the book, The Year of Less, and what you did with that book?
Yeah. Okay. So, gosh, at the beginning, it's so interesting to be reflecting on this now because it's been 10 years since I did that, which is always just interesting because, like, the book, someone reads it for the first time, it's new to them, and you're like, I did that experience. Like, I started it in July of 2014.
How old were you then, by
I was
the way?
29. Like, I was a baby.
I'm so impressed at how young you were at like tackling these things.
Yeah, I was a baby. One of the things that was true was that, unfortunately, for a bunch of different reasons, I had to move, I think it was 5 times. And in moving so many times, you can't help but notice the fact that you're basically just moving things like from closet to closet. You're not even unpacking so much stuff. There's so many boxes of things that you just seem to own and keep in storage, but like you never actually use them. And I think if you just lived in one place for a long time, it's easy to kind of ignore that or just feel like that's kind of like, for lack of better terms, quote unquote normal. Like it's just a thing you do, you just keep some stuff in storage. But I think when you move it so many times, you really start to see, I don't even know what some of this stuff is. Like, I don't even know what's in some of these boxes.
Yeah.
And I keep paying. I was doing the moving, but you're still paying to like rent a moving truck to like move things around. And I'm like, what even is all of this stuff? I think like there was also probably just regular kind of life stress, work stress. Like there were some different things happening. The moves were a big part of it. And then the other thing that was true is that a big part of the decision at first was actually financial. And it was that like at the time I was writing a personal finance blog. And on the blog, I would share my budgets. So I would share them at the start of the month, like what I kind of thought my numbers would look like. And then I would share an updated budget at the end. And I would say like, you know, I'm going to save 20% of my income. And actually that should have been doable for sort of the amount I was earning, where I was living. Like it should have been doable. But at the end of every single month, I would write like basically all the reasons why I couldn't hit that and why I was only saving like max, like, you know, 5, 8, 10, like sometimes I hit 10 or so percent, but like it wasn't very much. And I did that for 12 months in a row. And when you are documenting things and sharing it for like, you start to notice, like things about like, what am I writing every single month? Like, what is this thing that I'm sharing every single month? They're not excuses, but like your reasoning, your thoughts, like you see the pattern, right? And so like once you see the pattern, you're like, something isn't right here. Like something doesn't feel quite right here. Like actually this, like saving more should be doable. I should be able to do this. So I think I'm going to try something different. So at first it was strictly financial. And the thought was, it actually had nothing to do with stuff. At first it was like, I'm just going to try to not shop. Like I'm going to try to not buy new things and see if that helps me save. So it started like purely financial, and then sort of, I don't know, I got like the idea to declutter, I think, from all the moves, and then that just kind of spiraled into something totally different.
What did it spiral into? Like, tell us about that part, because this is such a bold, brave thing to do at 29. I mean, at any age, but particularly so young. So how did it evolve, and what motivated you to turn it into something deeper?
My first thought was like, you know, yeah, I'll do a little declutter, but I didn't really know what that meant. And this was like, I think it was actually maybe 4 or 5 months like before Marie Kondo's books had come to North America. I feel like they came out like October 2014, and so I started this just a few months. So it's like I wasn't following sort of anyone's guidance, and it's that's very obvious. Like when I tell you what I did was basically like room by room, I would empty the drawers or the closet or whatever onto the floor, and I made a huge mess, and then I had to clean it up. So like I don't know if there's a lot of decluttering experts that say like that's what maybe they do. I don't really know, but
I like it. I think it's a great strategy.
Forces you to deal
I mean,
with
for
it.
some people, it could be just really overwhelming and just leave a lot of mess, right? But yeah, I was motivated by it. So when I would see the mess, like I was someone I wanted it cleaned up, and I don't know, I was just like ruthless. Like I started room by room, and like it was kind of like, oh, like the kitchen, there weren't that many things. Like actually, that was a pretty practical room. You know, I didn't have a lot of extra. But then it was things like clothes. Like there were so many items of clothing that I held on to but I never wore, and there's so many stories I realized that I was telling myself about why I was holding on to everything, or like when I'll wear it one day, or like this dress I used to love and it fit me so well, like it'll fit well again one day or something. Like it was all kinds of things. And eventually, like I just got really, really serious with myself and was like, no, like it was kind of cutthroat, but it was very like, have I used this? Am I actually going to use this? Like if the answer was no, it got bagged up and was donated. So I think like, you know, I thought I'll just declutter, but in the first month, if I remember correctly, I donated something like 43% of my belongings.
Wow.
And so I think like looking at a number like that, and even just like how many times I like literally filled my car from like the floor to ceiling, all square inches that you could find. Like, I think when you see that, you're like, oh, something's happening here. Actually, this is, and it's only 1 month. And I'm like, I'm going to do this for a year. I'm like, what is happening here?
Did you miss any of those items, if we're being
Absolutely
honest?
none. To be honest, I don't remember so much of whatever I got rid of. I hold on to, like, not very much. I have like one box left at my dad's house, but it's just one of those like kind of a U-Haul small size. So like, it's not very big. And that's like sentimental things. So like photos, my high school yearbooks, like I didn't get rid of things like that. Like I literally was just getting rid of the things. I'm never going to wear it. I've never used this. Like, why do I ask this?
Why do I have this?
But no, I've never missed anything. I remember too, like, I didn't do it then, but it's something I've done like over the years, is I've gotten rid of journals that I used to write in. And I remember a friend being like, oh, you're going to regret that. Don't do that. And I'm like, I've never even regretted that.
Yeah.
Because when I
Yeah.
looked at them, they made me feel anxious. And I like felt sad for my younger self. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
need this. Like
Me
nobody
too.
needs.
Me
So I just
too.
got rid. I've never regretted it.
So one of the things like Colette and I talk about, and we did it in another episode, is I think it was like a Phil Stutz thing where he says that one of the things we do in life is we rely on all of these like low level things like consuming food or shopping or alcohol. And I know you have your own relationship with sobriety. And we do that to sort of cut the emotional tension in our lives all the time. You know, we're wicking away all the stress from daily life. And so when you start peeling back these coping mechanisms, like what was that like to not rely on shopping or alcohol?
Yeah. So in that sense, it probably makes sense like to talk about the sobriety aspect first, because I stopped drinking
Yeah.
before this. So
Yeah.
actually, it's almost like I'd sort of been on this journey that I didn't even really understand until the shopping ban. But I think like over the years, I had slowly been getting rid of those things. And even earlier than that, like the reason I started writing about personal finance was I was documenting paying off a bunch of debt. And so it was like I was debt free. So that kind of changed, you know, some of my relationship with money. Then I guess I stopped. I like recreationally used like certain drugs when I was younger. I stopped doing that when I was like 25, I think. It's been like so long now. Like 25. And then I stopped drinking when I was 27. And so I do think above all else, like living a sober life has changed me more than anything. Like there are obviously other things that you can numb yourself with, but I think like alcohol, if you're drinking the way that I was, is like very quickly leads into just a dissociation, right? Like it was to be completely disconnected, like from my body and what was true for me. So I think like that has changed me above all else. Then yeah, my spending probably did pick up a little bit. So I wasn't going back into debt, but there were probably more, I'd say like emotional purchases. Like I didn't actually identify with like retail therapy from the angle, I guess, of like treating myself. Like I don't think treating myself has ever been something I've really done. I was more the kind of person who, like if I was having a hard time, bad day, would buy myself the thing or and kind of impulsively buy the thing. Just it's almost like a pick me up.
Little pick me up. Exactly. It's a little hit of dopamine.
So I think I did like more of that. And then the shopping ban obviously forced me to recognize that I couldn't do that anymore. And so it's interesting because like one of the questions I've been asked before is like, okay, like, you know, if you can't drink, if you can't shop, like what do you do? And I'm like, I cried a lot that year. Like I actually think the year of Lesser, like that year was one of the hardest years that I've emotionally ever gone through. And that's, you know, there's more that I know about myself even now, like, because I hadn't even done any therapy at that point. Now I have. So there's like a lot more I understand about myself now. But it's like, I just had to feel my feelings. And some of them were really, really hard. And I had no strategy. So it was just like, I have to be sad. There was a lot more self-soothing. There was a lot more call a friend or just like have a hot bath or cry in bed. Like, You just get it out emotionally.
So when you let go of alcohol and shopping, things that you were doing not so much as a treat, but a kind of a coping mechanism, not to feel feelings, then all the feelings are there and you have to sit with yourself. And so all that stored up, unprocessed emotion then comes to the surface for you and you find yourself crying and feeling and, you know, maybe in that really engaged way for the first time without any true escapes, or at least the escapes that you were accustomed to. But it sounds like even though it was a very intense year, it led to a true metamorphosis and a beginning of really knowing and understanding yourself. Did you find that that was the pivotal time that you really met yourself for the first time?
Yeah, I do think so. I also really like that you use the word beginning because like it does sort of feel like the beginning, right? Like it was a challenge, an experiment that I just did for myself. and I learned some things, but yeah, I think like it was the beginning. I think especially if we just kind of used it from the angle or the aspect of the fact like I had to feel my feelings for the first time, like truly.
Right.
That was just the beginning of that. And I honestly think like this is still like probably a lifelong journey for me of like how do you actually understand yourself and let yourself feel things, validate yourself, validate the feelings that you're having. But something I did not know about myself at 29 is that like I probably have complex PTSD. And so like that's something I've only really understood for the last couple of years. And then like it opens my eyes up so much to like various things that I've done in life. I do think it was just the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're now what, almost 40?
Yeah, I'm 39.
So you're in a very different phase of life and space in life. And maybe just now understanding that you probably have complex PTSD and everything is a lifelong journey to work through, right? Including that. What would you tell listeners if it were like, imagine that it was your best friend looking to you for advice, what would you say that you've learned that you would want somebody else to maybe consider for their own life?
I mean, I do think a big one, and probably the thing I will have to work on for my whole life, is to not feel ashamed of things I've done or, money I've spent or just decisions that I've made, because there's so much stuff that we don't understand about ourselves. And the reasons behind why we do things. I then think it's like an interesting journey when you start to figure out maybe some of the whys. That can lead to a whole bunch of new emotions. Like maybe you're angry or maybe you're like there's all kinds of stuff you kind of have to then reckon with once you start to understand some of the reasons behind like why you are the way you are. But like shame has to be taken out of it. I like that you use the word compassion there. I feel like self-compassion and trying to reduce shame, they will be the skills of my life that because I just think that is what keeps us trapped. It's what keeps us from taking action. Not meaning like, I don't know, kind of intense like productivity type things. Just like, taking some kind of action towards changing your life. I also, like, this is something that came up more in adventures than it did in the year of lust. But I think a big thing that I still have to remind myself of is that if someone is wanting to change your life, that does mean your life is going to change. And that might sound like a really silly thing to say, but I don't think that people really grapple with that enough. And I think because, you make a change and all kinds of things change. It's not just, oh, I've changed this habit. It's like that could change how you show up, then how other people relate to you. It could change your relationships. It could change, all kinds of things. And I also think it's probably one of the reasons we don't change is because it does have a ripple effect and so many other areas of your life will be touched on or like impacted. And that's hard, but it's like, I think if we don't tell each other that, then it's not like a warning, but like we're doing a disservice by not talking about the fact that it will be all encompassing. You can just say like, I would like to stop, doing this coping mechanism, or I would like to stop dissociating and be a person who feels her feelings and has, hard conversations and stuff like that. It's like, well, that has a big impact on your life.
It sure does.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I live now and the relationships I have now. All of it is so much healthier than anything I've experienced before, and like is completely out of the realm of what I ever thought was possible. Like, thinking about friendships or like romantic partnership, like the connections I have now are so different than anything I could have even imagined.
I love that you say that because like what before you got on the call, we were talking about you do lose people.
Yes.
You will lose
Yes.
people. And that's the thing that I think people stay stuck around is like, well, if I don't go out and drink with these people, I'm not going to have any friends. But what I'm hearing you say is that on the other side of that is really good stuff if you can like stay the course.
Yeah, that's something my dad always says. My dad is someone who's sober as well. And I mean, he's been sober like forever at this point. But yeah, my dad is someone who's sober. And I remember him saying to me, it's so much better on this side. Like it can take a long time to feel that or to like really understand what that means for you, but it's like after years of making these decisions that are right for you, like, you not only, you learn so much about your own values, like what's important to you, like, boundaries you might have that could be totally different, but also will create really healthy relationships to come in.
That is lifelong work, right? To constantly meet yourself, be with yourself, validate, offer yourself compassion and grace. And I particularly love what you're saying about letting go of shame for our younger selves, because that really keeps us stuck. If we can look back on mistakes we made, and there might be regret. I really like to tease that part out. I don't think that you celebrate every single decision you made. I mean, I've done some stupid, fucked up things that brought about some really crappy consequences.
Same.
And I look back and part of me goes, oh, like I just want to cringe. And it almost feels humiliating even just to re-witness it in my own mind. And yet I try to bring that loving parent, internal parent part of me there to say, that young Colette did the best she could with what she knew at the time. And I learned from those mistakes, and I feel tenderness toward her, not judgment and contempt. And I think when we begin to do that, even though it's not easy, it's a conscious choice, we begin to free ourselves to move forward in the future and cultivate the life we want. And we give ourselves permission to continue to make mistakes and learn from them. And it sounds like this is the way you're living your life, that you're on a beautiful journey of really being alive and loving toward yourself, and that it's bringing loving, healthy people into your life.
Thank you for saying that. That definitely feels true. It feels like actually I haven't done therapy in a couple of years now, but it feels like that's like one of the last things my therapist said to me, was she was just like, I think you don't understand this or didn't understand this, but like your journey has been learning how to love yourself and just treating yourself like with love and respect. And it's like, I
have goosebumps everywhere when you say that. Because that's it, right? You can create whatever life you want, but you've got to have that foundation and some self-love. And self-love doesn't mean that you have all this self-confidence, right? It just means that we show up for ourselves and we're caring toward ourselves the way we would be toward anyone else we love.
Yeah.
People talk about having courage, but most of us don't feel very brave when we're standing there in the face of our fear and we want the thing, perhaps, maybe we don't even know what it is, it's on the other side of the fear. So how do you see that? What steps do you take to go on that journey when you're scared, but you've got to act anyway?
Yeah, one of the first things, and I've really had to practice this, but it is something that I probably now try to remind myself near the start of this, of like if I'm trying to make a change now, is I do try to live in a way where it's all an experiment. Like I try not to focus on, like if I make this decision and it's wrong or I decide I don't like it, I try not to, I guess, stress too much about that. Like it's like understanding you can reverse out, like you can decide actually this wasn't the right one for me. I can actually just change my mind again. Like that's allowed. So like if you're curious about something, just try it. And like if it's not working, either reverse or change direction. Like and like you won't actually know how you feel about the thing until you start it. So that permission, I guess, of just like, it's just an experiment. Like you're not making a decision for the rest of your life and you have to hold on to this decision forever and ever.
Reducing the stakes and like really relying on the process. I know even in the book, Adventures in Opting Out, it's like this extended metaphor of the hike, right? Or the climb. And you're like, it's not all about the summit. It's not all about like this outcome. It's all about like the process of showing up and playing with things and reworking things when you need to. I love that.
That's in fact really the only way we can do it. But I think people do get stuck on this. So I'm glad you're saying it. first of all, analysis paralysis, right? We want to like figure it all out first. And what's the right choice? And a favorite phrase of mine is I always like to say, because I approach it much the same that you do, I'm not outcome dependent, right? That is my favorite thing to remind myself of, because it gives myself permission to fail, to mess up, to be wrong about what I thought was going to be good for me or fulfilling, and to pivot. Not only can you change your mind, but you can redirect. Few decisions are really going to wreck your life. Now, some can,
Sure.
and I've made some of those too, but even those I managed to, make something beautiful out of. So if we can stop thinking about everything we're going to try as, oh my gosh, I have to be good enough for it, and I have to know what it's going to do, and I have to know how it's going to change, and what if I make a mistake? Who cares? Maybe you do make a mistake, but maybe that mistake leads to this beautiful new pathway up the mountain that you never would have discovered.
The other thing that's become true over the years is that one of the other ways that I guess can feel confident in making changes is I've done it enough to know that I can handle things.
Yes.
So it's I've made enough changes and also pivots. There are ones I've completely reversed out of. There are ones that I've just had to sidestep somewhere. There's so many things that I now have almost this in my body. There is now memory of I know how to handle it. So even if I'm still terrified to start, I do have enough history in my body that tells me I can handle it. So kind of no matter what comes up, I don't want to put myself into the danger zone of way outside my comfort zone, right. But I can handle being pushed. I can handle, if this doesn't work, if I need to do something else, I can handle that.
This is why people are stuck, because change is scary. And because we don't have what you describe, you have to build a muscle for it. It's like the paradox of fear, right? Which is that the more you do the thing you're afraid of, the less afraid you become. But in order to get to that place, you have to do the thing you're afraid of. And it's so much as possible for all of us if we're willing to collaborate with fear and move with fear instead of feeling like we have to overcome it and then we'll act.
It's interesting how listening to you say that, it brought me back to I'd say the first 6 months of quitting drinking, which because I think it was the word you used there, willing, not courageous. It's nothing about that felt courageous. And actually sometimes I think it feels important almost to share some of these stories, which is the first time you make a big change, you're probably actually not going to do it with full honesty and integrity. I found it so scary to tell my friends that I was thinking about quitting drinking. So I kind of just lied and said I had homework all the time. Honestly, but I'm but that is a thing it took. And it's now if I was going to do something, I have many years of sobriety behind me that I'm I could easily talk about the thing and it's not as scary, but it's 27 years old thinking about quitting drinking, which definitely affected my entire social life and all of my relationships. I didn't feel courageous with it in the beginning. Honestly, I probably didn't feel courageous with sobriety for 5+ years.
Wow. That's
so
important to
glad
say.
you're saying this. I'm so glad you're saying this, because this is the hardest part of it, is that we don't feel courageous. We don't feel brave. And we don't do it with honesty and integrity at the beginning because we're unsure.
Yes.
We're racked with fear and self-doubt, and we don't even know if we're taking the right steps. But this is why action is so important. Had you never been willing to go through that period of discomfort and self-doubt and taking action without knowing where it would lead you, you wouldn't be living the kind of intentional life you are now.
No, it's true. And it's that's why I'm not necessarily sharing that as advice for it's more just if you're not comfortable telling everyone what new thing you're doing, you don't have to.
Don't.
And with all changes, that's definitely something I've learned is you learn over time who are the people that you can talk to about these kinds of things with, and who are the people you can't. Who are the people who are, to be blunt, just gonna shit all over it. You're gonna learn that. But then you also learn who the people are who are just going to support you unconditionally and are just going to be happy with you doing whatever's right for you.
I love what you write. I love it. And I wanted this for the listeners because I want to like talk to them a little bit about when you said signs of being on the wrong path. This is from your adventures book. I love that part. And you write, you complain about the same thing over and over for weeks, months, or maybe even years. You feel bored, ambivalent, or numb about a job, relationship, or situation. You have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. You feel defensive about your choices. You don't like yourself very much, but you aren't sure why. You don't like to think about where your money is going or being used for. You feel jealous when you see other people doing things you want to do. You see the direction you are heading in and you don't like it.
Oof.
I was like,
Boom.
ugh,
Yeah.
mic drop,
Yeah.
right? Like, so this is time to like look at yourself and go, maybe it's time for an experiment.
When somebody dares to take the risk, they're willing to take the risk, to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be assertive about what they need, and they're witnessed and space is held for them, and that person gives a loving, accepting response. There is nothing more healing and satisfying and soul enriching than those moments. Like I could cry just even thinking about
Yeah.
it. That's like the
It's the
good
stuff.
of what we get to do as therapists and as people. If we can create that kind of connection with somebody, like everything else in life is gravy.
I totally agree with what you guys were saying, but I want to take us back to like the beginning of this conversation where you take the alcohol out of the story, you take the shopping out of the story, you get quiet, and you cried more in that year than you probably ever cried in your whole life. There is a part where you have to get connected with self, you have to release emotion, or you are not worth anything in relationship. You're so constipated, you're just like so shut down, you can't get there. So there has to be a time in life where you're getting really real with self before, you
Yeah.
know, and not that these things can't happen simultaneously, but that emotional growth is like, there's got to be a phase of that.
It's very true. I also think like that's something I appreciate in my partnership so much is that we talk about how our relationships with ourselves is like number one. So like if one of us is feeling disconnected from ourselves, we're not going to have a good relationship.
I'm so glad you circled back to that, Laura, before we wrapped up. And I realize we're out of time. But I mean, Cait, I could just talk to you all day.
Yes.
And savor every moment. You are walking the walk and living it and writing beautifully about it. And you just exude this sense of warmth and peace. And I hope everyone who's listening will check us out on YouTube so that they can see what this looks like and also hear that it doesn't start out so pretty and perfect.
No.
It's messy, but this is something we can all do. So thank you for being an inspiration to everyone. And before we let you go, can you tell the listeners how they can find you and connect with you?
Well, first, like,
and your books.
I mean, first, thank you for that. That's such a nice and like generous reflection. I would say like the number one place, because I am a writer, so like I write a newsletter on Substack. So it's just like caitflanders.substack.com, I think is the link. So I'm on Substack.
And Cait is Cait,
Yes.
just for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So Cait Flanders, Substack. I am on Instagram a little bit. Again, it's just Cait Flanders. Across the board, I do share pictures of like my hikes and places that I go outside. So if nothing else, maybe you'll enjoy the pictures.
And Cait, what are you working on next? Like what's the next thing?
Yeah, so it's interesting now because I think when people have asked that question over the last few years, I almost felt like, the answer was like nothing because I just didn't know. I think I was doing a lot of healing work for the last few years, and it's like really hard to write, especially anything personal when you're in the thick of that. But yeah, I'm working on a book proposal right now. So it's one of those things where you're like, you can't say too much because you need to find out if a publisher is even interested. And, maybe they will be. And if they're not, I do actually believe in it enough. I think I would even go the self-publishing route. So we'll just see what happens, but hopefully book number 3.
Well, I'm here for it. So
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with
Yes.
us. And everyone, all of our listeners, thank you for your support. Check out Cait's amazing books. And we're going to link to everything in our show notes and also her Substack. And we hope you got some great insights from the couch today. We'll see you next time.